The night of my birthday, my family didn't pour me a drink. My mother handed me a laminated check-in sheet and asked me, very sweetly, if I could manage the front desk while the caterers finished setting up. 40 guests were already pulling into the gravel lot of Birchwood Inn. I could hear the car doors, the laughter, the crunch of footsteps on the path my grandmother had laid stone by stone the summer before I was born. Sage's name was on a hand-painted banner above the fireplace. Mine wasn't anywhere. I tied on my apron, the one that says Birchwood across the front in green embroidery, the one I have worn 6 days a week for 6 years, and I checked people in at my grandmother's front desk. On my own birthday, while my sister sat in the sitting room opening cards like it was Christmas morning. 11 days later, my father called me from a number I didn't recognize. His voice was the quietest I had ever heard it. He said, "Felicity, please tell me you didn't take the share register with you." He thought he was calling about a piece of paper. He had no idea what I was carrying. Welcome back to Mr. Nathaniel Stories. If you've ever been the person everyone counts on, and the last one anyone thinks to celebrate, stay with me. Drop a comment and subscribe so the next story reaches you too. My name is Felicity, and I am 28 years old, and I have been running Birchwood Inn since I was 22. Not helping run it, running it. Reservations, payroll, vendor accounts, maintenance scheduling, the quarterly filings, the Ontario tourism renewal applications, the guest reviews. I answered at 11 o'clock at night on my phone because no one else was awake, and someone had posted that the towels weren't fluffy enough. Birchwood sits on 12 acres of cedar and maple just outside Picton in Prince Edward County, where every second weekend from May to October someone is getting married in a barn or hosting a wine tour, and the inns that survive are the ones with a system. I was the system. My grandmother Edith built Birchwood in 1988 with a $40,000 loan she got from a credit union in Belleville after 2 chartered banks told her no. She was 41 years old, recently divorced, with 2 daughters, and a piece of land she had inherited that everyone said was too far from the highway to be worth anything. She turned it into something that turned out to be worth quite a lot. When I was little, she would let me sit behind the front desk and answer the phone. "Birchwood Inn, how can I help you?" I must have said it 1,000 times before I was 12. She would listen from the kitchen and nod when I got it right. She never once let me call it playing. "You're not playing at it," she would say. "You're learning how to run it." She was the only person in my life who ever looked at what I did and called it what it was. My father came into the picture the way stepfathers sometimes do, confident, charming, full of ideas about marketing and scale. He and my mother had been together since I was 9. He is not a bad man. He is a man who learned early that other people's competence could feel like permission, and that if you stood close enough to something successful long enough, you could start to believe you'd built it. He never touched the books. He never reconciled a vendor invoice or sat on hold with the WSIB line for 40 minutes waiting on a seasonal worker's claim. But he walked through the dining room like he'd poured the foundation himself, and most guests assumed he had, and he never corrected them. My mother handled the flowers and the front-of-house charm and the social media posts that always photographed someone else's work. She is genuinely good at that. She is specifically good at making things look effortless that are not effortless at all. And then there is Sage. Sage is my half-sister, my father's daughter from his first marriage. She is 23 and she has my father's confidence without any of the guilt that sometimes tempers it. She has had what I count as 3 fresh starts in the past 4 years. The pop-up jewelry business she quit after one farmer's market season in Picton. The wellness brand she launched on Instagram and abandoned when the algorithm changed, and the Airbnb property she convinced my parents to co-sign for in a house outside Kingston last February. The Kingston property lasted 8 months. When the bookings dried up and the carrying costs didn't, it left behind just over $91,000 in outstanding debt. My father's name is on that loan beside Sage's. None of that was ever called debt in our house. It was called learning. It was called finding her footing. My mother used to look at me when she said those things, the way you look at someone you're hoping won't ask a follow-up question. I didn't ask. I never asked. I told myself that was maturity. That love meant carrying things quietly and waiting for the moment someone finally looked up and chose you. I built my whole life on that belief. It took a party I planned myself to show me the crack straight through the middle of it. 3 weeks before my birthday, my mother called and said they were doing something special this year. My chest did that stupid hopeful thing. "It's your year, sweetheart," she said. "Just help me get the guest list together." I helped. Of course I helped. I printed the seating chart. I ordered the cheese platters from the dairy in Consequon. I confirmed the caterer, the same one we use for wedding rehearsals, and I asked no questions about why the guest list was 40 people, most of whom I recognized as Sage's friends from Toronto, and why the only person there because of me was Ravi, our head of housekeeping, and only because someone had to manage the rooms. I told myself I was misreading things. I am very good with numbers. I have never been good at talking myself out of hope. The morning of the party, I arrived at 6 to get the rooms turned over, and the breakfast service finished before the evening guests came in. By noon, I was rearranging chairs in the garden. That was when I moved a potted cedar near the back gate and found the banner rolled up in craft paper, tied with twine. I unrolled one end just far enough to read it. New beginnings. Not happy birthday, not even my name, just New Beginnings in navy and gold 4 feet wide. I rolled it back up, set it against the fence, and finished moving the chairs. By 4 o'clock the garden was full. My mother had changed into a silk blouse I hadn't seen before. My father was doing his walk through the room thing, clasping shoulders, throwing his head back when he laughed. Sage arrived in the dress she had bought on my mother's credit card and let people fuss over her the way she always does. Tilting her head just slightly, laughing a little, making the attention look like it found her by accident. My mother found me by the drinks table at 4:45. She had something over her arm. "You're so good at all of this," she said. "Would you mind taking the front desk for a bit? Just until we get through the toasts. You know how the system works." She held out my apron. The birchwood apron, green embroidery, mine. I took it. My hands took it before the rest of me decided anything. I was tying the strings behind my back when my father tapped his glass and called for attention. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about new chapters and bold moves. He looked at Sage the way you look at someone you've decided the story is about. "We're giving Sage the annex building," he said. "A proper wellness retreat, yoga, programs, the whole vision. We have the financing lined up." He raised his glass. "To Sage. To Birchwood's next chapter." 40 people applauded. Sage pressed both hands over her mouth and let the tears come. My father put his arm around her. I stood at the front desk of my grandmother's inn on my birthday and listened to my father announce that they were borrowing against the property. Against a place I had kept running for 6 years to fund my sister's 4th fresh start. A woman I had checked in earlier that week handed me her empty glass without looking at me. Ravi appeared at my elbow at some point. He has worked here 3 years and has never once said more than he means. He looked at the room, then at me, then at the apron, and he gave me one small nod, the kind that says I see exactly what is happening here without any of the words. Then he went back to the rooms. It was enough. Knowing that at least one person in that building was watching clearly. I served the cheese plates. I refreshed the drinks. I smiled when Sage opened a card from my father that had a cashier's check inside. I didn't see the amount, but I heard what he said when she looked up at him. "For the renovation. Get it exactly the way you want it." My grandmother's voice came to me the way it has come since she died. Not loud, just present, close to the ear. Like she is standing just off to my left. "You're not playing at it. Pay attention." I cut the birthday cake, my own birthday cake, which my mother had ordered, and which said "Congratulations" on it in blue icing, and I served it slice by slice to my sister's party, and I smiled the entire time. Not because I forgave them. Not because I hadn't understood what was happening. I smiled because somewhere between the banner and the apron and that toast I had already left. My body was still there, tying the strings and refilling the punch, but the part of me that had spent 28 years waiting to be chosen had quietly stood up and walked out the door. That night, after the last car left and the dishwasher was running, and my mother told me I had done a wonderful job, I drove to my apartment in Picton. I did not pack in anger. I want to be honest about that. I packed the way I do inventory, methodically, only what mattered. Laptop, documents, a change of clothes. And from the back of my filing cabinet, a white envelope in my grandmother's handwriting. Her name in the return corner, E. Moreau. She had given it to me 3 days before she died. She was in the palliative care unit in Belleville, and her hands were thin but her grip was not. She pressed it into mine and closed my fingers over it. "Don't open this," she said, "unless they try to take the inn or go behind your back on the money. Then it's yours. All of it." I asked what she meant by all of it. She looked at me the way she always did, like the answer was something I already had, and just hadn't turned over yet. She died on a Tuesday. The inn opened the following Friday, because May long weekend doesn't wait, and I was the one who opened it. I kept the envelope in the filing cabinet for 14 months. Nothing crossed the line she had drawn. No one tried to take the inn. No one went behind my back on the money, not that I knew of. The line turned out to be a cashier's check handed to my sister at a party and a banner that said "New Beginnings." I put the envelope in my bag. I didn't open it that night. I turned off the lights in my apartment and sat in the dark for a while and let myself understand that I was already gone. I opened the envelope 9 days later at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon with a bread knife and no ceremony. Inside, a folded corporate document, a certificate, and a letter in my grandmother's handwriting. The document was on proper legal paper, the kind that feels different in your hands. It was a share register and a shareholder declaration for Birchwood Holdings, Inc., the corporation that owns the inn and the 12 acres under it. The share transfer had been executed quietly, some years before she fell ill. She had arranged it and then waited, and told no one. About a third of the way down the first page, my name. Registered controlling shareholder, 60% common shares, Felicity Moreau. I read it 4 times before the words held still. My grandmother had owned 60% of Birchwood Holdings, the controlling interest. My mother held 40. My father, for all his years of walking that dining room like he'd built it, had never owned a single share. He was not a shareholder at all. He was an operator on a handshake arrangement that had never been formalized, not once in 15 years. And at some point before she got sick, my grandmother had transferred her controlling 60% to me. I had been the controlling shareholder of Birchwood Holdings for 14 months without knowing it. The question landed immediately. If this was true, why had nothing changed? No letters from the corporate registry, no shareholder notices, no tax documents with my name where a 60% owner's name should be. Because nothing had been filed. My grandmother had executed the transfer and sealed it away. After she died, the estate had never been formally updated on this one point. The corporate registry still showed her name. The bank still dealt with my father as though he were the owner, because no one had corrected them. No one had corrected the lender either. Not yet. I read her letter last. It was short, which was like her. No wasted words. She told me she had chosen me on purpose. She told me she had watched what the inn had cost me, the holidays I never took, the salary that was a fraction of what the role was worth, the way my work disappeared into the word family every time someone might otherwise have said thank you. She said she had fixed it the only way she knew how. There was one sentence I have read so many times I could say it in my sleep. You kept this place running when no one else would, and they gave you a title instead of a check. I'm giving you the building. And at the very bottom, almost an afterthought, the line that turned out to be a prophecy. If they try to borrow against it, they'll need you. Let them come to you. There was a business card paper-clipped to the back. Douglas Kerr, CPA, CA, my grandmother's accountant for 22 years. She had underlined the phone number twice. I called him that afternoon. He picked up on the second ring, and his voice had the settled quality of someone who has seen everything, and is no longer surprised by any of it. "Mrs. Moreau," he said. "I've been wondering when you'd call." Douglas filled in the rest carefully, in language I could follow. My father had applied for a $265,000 refinance on the inn property through a private lender, enough to clear Sage's $91,000 debt, fund the annex renovation, and have something left over for whatever my sister decided to call her next beginning. He had submitted the application naming himself as the controlling operator of Birchwood Holdings. The lender's underwriter had pulled the corporate registry and flagged a discrepancy 3 days earlier. The controlling shareholder on record did not match my father's application. The file had stalled. "Your father doesn't know the underwriters already found it," Douglas said, "but he will very soon." I let my father's calls go to voicemail for 11 days. There were 12 of them. I found a flat in Picton I could afford on my own. Smaller than my old place, south-facing, smelling like fresh paint and someone else's abandoned basil plant on the windowsill. I signed a 12-month lease with my name only. I started a bookkeeping contract with a small accounting office in Wellington, real pay. The kind of number I had been embarrassed to say out loud to my father. On my third day, the senior partner caught a reconciliation error I had flagged and thanked me for it in front of the office. A 2-minute exchange over a spreadsheet, and I had to excuse myself to the hallway afterward, because I could not remember the last time anyone had thanked me for the work, instead of simply assuming it would be there. Standing in that hallway, I understood something I should have understood 6 years earlier. It had never been that I was difficult to appreciate. It was that I had been working inside a system where my output was treated as a natural resource, renewable, free, and not worth naming. I did not do anything dramatic to the inn while I was gone. I want to be clear about that. I did not change a password. I did not move a file. I did not sabotage a single thing. I simply stopped. And when I stopped, the inn kept running. Ravi and the staff were there, and the systems held. But the things that required my specific login, my institutional memory, my particular knowledge of 6 years of custom-built spreadsheets and vendor relationships, those things stalled. And my father noticed. "The monthly HST remittance is due Friday, and I can't locate the CRA credentials," he texted on day 8. "Did you change something?" I hadn't changed a thing. He had just never needed to know it before. On day 11, my father called from the number I didn't recognize. I answered the 12th call. His voice was quiet, in a way I had never heard from him. Not the quietness of thought, the quietness of a man who has walked to the edge of something and looked down. "Felicity." A long breath. "Please tell me you didn't take the share register with you." I could have pretended not to understand. I didn't. "Take what, Dad?" And I listened to him, try to explain his way out of a corner he had walked into on his own. The lender had called. There was a problem with the corporate documents, a discrepancy in the shareholder registry, something about the transfer. His words came in pieces, and I let them come. "They're saying there's a controlling shareholder, a different controlling shareholder, and the file can't move forward without consent." He stopped. "Felicity, is it you?" I didn't answer. In the silence, he kept talking the way frightened people do, and then he said the thing he shouldn't have. "If they pull the full file apart, there are going to be questions about how the books were kept all these years. You know how it looks when one person has been handling everything alone with no oversight. You know how that reads." There it was. He wasn't crying because he had handed me an apron at my own birthday. He was crying because he had just reminded me, accidentally, that I had 6 years of records I understood better than anyone alive, and that my detailed knowledge of Birchwood's finances could cut in any direction I chose. He thought that was a threat. He didn't understand it was the whole point. "Let's keep this in the family," he said. The same phrase, the same reach for it. "You bring the documents back. We sort it out between us. We move forward." "The way we moved forward at my birthday," I said. He didn't have an answer for that. I told him I'd be in touch. I hung up. I sat very still for a moment. Then I called Douglas. Before I went back to that inn, I made myself look at the whole shape of it at once. The way you stand back from something to see it properly. My family had thrown a party that was never mine, funded by a loan secured against a property that had been legally mine for over a year. The refinance my father had arranged to pay for Sage's fourth fresh start couldn't close without my signature. My father, who had operated Birchwood for 15 years, on a handshake arrangement that no one had ever formalized, had listed himself as the controlling operator on a mortgage application. That was going to be, as the lender's underwriter had already quietly noted in the file, a significant problem entirely separate from everything else. I hadn't needed to do anything, except stop pretending I was something I wasn't. Douglas had found one more thing before our meeting. Going through my grandmother's complete estate records, he had found a letter she had written in 2022 and never sent. It was addressed to my mother. It was short. It said, "I've made sure Felicity is protected. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. She has carried more than her share." My mother had known, not the full legal detail perhaps, but she had known that my grandmother had done something with the shares, and she had said nothing, not for 2 years. She had let me keep working, keep covering payroll, keep reconciling the books at my kitchen table at midnight, because a person who doesn't know what she owns is easier to manage than one who does. That letter did not make me angry the way I expected it to. It made me grieve, in the specific way you grieve when you stop hoping for something you have been hoping for a very long time. I folded it carefully and put it back. I asked Douglas if he would come to the inn on Saturday and speak plainly about what he had witnessed when my grandmother executed the share transfer. He said he would bring the notarized copies and the witness signatures, and he wouldn't miss it. I asked Ravi if he would be there. He said he'd be in at 8. I didn't prepare a speech. I had the documents and the witnesses and the truth, and in my experience those 3 things don't need one. I did take the Apron. The inn was warm and full on Saturday evening. My father had invited family, aunts, 2 cousins, people who had driven from Kingston and Belleville, because they had heard something, had gone sideways and wanted to see how it landed. About 30 people in the dining room. Sage in the chair closest to the window, where the light is best, where she always sits. My father had papers at the head of the table, a pen angled toward the empty chair he had left for me. I sat. I didn't touch the pen. I set my folder on the table, left it closed, and let the silence stretch until people noticed it. Sage broke it first because she always does. "You'd really do this?" Her voice tilted up just enough to pull the room toward her. "To your own family? After everything we've built here together?" I looked at her the way you look at someone you've finally stopped being afraid of. "I'm keeping it in the family," I said. "My grandmother's." I opened the folder. I placed the share transfer and the corporate declaration on the table, turned so the people nearest could read them, and put my finger under one line. Douglas stood up from the corner where he had been sitting quietly. His voice was the same as it always was, level, unhurried, not unkind. "I witnessed Edith execute this transfer," he said. "I have the notarized copies and I signed on 2 separate lines the way she required. It is real. It has always been real." He sat back down. The room went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when the thing everyone assumed was a misunderstanding turns out not to be. "The controlling interest passed to me the day my grandmother died," I said. I kept my voice even. 60%. I have held it for 14 months. I looked at my father. "You spent the last month filing a mortgage application in the inn's name without the consent of the controlling shareholder. The lender flagged it. You know this, because they called you." He tried to deny it. He reached for the word misunderstanding, then technicality, then something about lawyers and estate complexity. But the documents were on the table, and the witness was in the room. And the lender had already told him 3 days before exactly what I was now saying aloud. He looked at my mother. An instinct, a man looking to his partner for something to hold. She wouldn't meet his eyes. My mother's sister, who had driven up from Trenton specifically to be on my parents' side tonight, set down her fork. "Rhonda," she said, "did you know?" My mother opened her mouth. She closed it. She said something that was not quite yes and not quite no, and in 20 years of watching this family, I have learned that that particular silence is its own kind of answer. Every person in that dining room could read it. Sage tried the move that has never once failed her. She stood up too fast, grabbed the edge of the table and let the tears come, fast and real, and aimed directly at the room. "This is my home too. I grew up coming here. You'd really watch me lose everything?" The room did not move toward her. Ravi, standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms folded, said nothing. 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to since the funeral exchanged a look. My mother's sister, who had asked the question, looked at her plate and did not look up. I watched my sister realize that the tide she had always been able to turn simply was not turning. It was the saddest thing I have ever watched. I mean that with no triumph in it at all. My father set down the papers he had been holding. When he spoke again, the performance had left his voice. What was left was smaller and more honest than I had heard from him in years. "Felicity," he said, "I'm sorry." I believed he meant it in that moment. I believed it completely. That is not the same as meaning it, when it would have cost him something to say it earlier. "I know," I told him. "That's not the same as being right." Then I reached into my bag. I took out the apron. I didn't hold it up. I didn't make a gesture of it. I just stood, and I tied it on. The birchwood apron, green embroidery, the same one my mother had handed me at my own birthday to make me the help. And I walked around the end of that table and stood behind the front desk of my grandmother's inn. "You gave me this to make me staff," I said. I smoothed the front of it, the way my grandmother always did. It turns out I've always been the owner. I didn't close Birchwood. I want to say that clearly, because I know what people expect from these endings. I didn't lock the doors, or freeze the accounts, or do any of the dramatic things that would have felt good for about 40 minutes and then created years of wreckage. Birchwood stays open. It is open right now. Tonight, with the lights on in the dining room and the fire going in the sitting room because it is October, and it is cool in the county, and guests come here to feel settled. My father still walks through that dining room. He is genuinely good at it. He knows the regulars. He knows the rhythm of a weekend rush. He can bring a table of 10 back from a bad start with a handshake and a story. He can do all of that here for as long as he wants. What he cannot do is sign a financial document on behalf of the inn, authorize a capital expenditure, or approach a lender in Birchwood's name. We have a management agreement now, drafted by Douglas, that says what he can and cannot do in plain language. He signed it. He didn't say much when he signed it. I didn't need him to. My mother is still working through what the last 2 years have cost her. I think the hardest part for her is not the loss of access to the finances. It is knowing that I read the letter she never sent, and that I know she chose silence over honesty, and that I decided to keep her in my life anyway. Some people find grace harder to receive than punishment. I am giving her time. Sage's annex plan is gone. The $265,000 refinance never closed, and without it there is no renovation, no retreat, no fourth fresh start funded by 12 acres that were never my father's to mortgage. The $91,000 from the Kingston property is still outstanding. A matter between Sage and my father, who co-signed it, and the choices that made it. I didn't arrange the consequences, and I won't undo them. I have simply stopped standing between my sister and the weight of her own decisions. The weight that I always thought would break her is, as it turns out, teaching her things I could never have taught by carrying it longer. She is angry with me. I understand that. I have decided I can live more peacefully inside her anger than I ever lived inside her expectations. I did not get an apology I could frame. My father's "I'm sorry" was real, but it arrived at the exact moment it cost him the most, and helped him the least. That is not the same as being sorry, when it would have cost something to mean it. I know the difference now. My grandmother's letter is framed on the shelf behind the front desk, next to the original guest ledger from 1988 that she kept even after everything went digital. I put them there on purpose. The first record of Birchwood's guests, in her handwriting, and the last thing she ever put in mine. Two things side by side, watching over a room full of people who have no idea what almost happened here. Ravi stopped me last week before we opened for the weekend. He had been in early getting the rooms done, and he stood in the office doorway with the careful expression he has when he's thought something through. "The staff know," he said. "They've known for a long time who actually ran this place. I just thought you should hear that." That was all. He went back to the rooms. I stood in the office for a moment after he left, the office that has always been mine even when no document said so, and I felt something I don't have a precise word for. Not pride. Something quieter than that. The feeling of a thing being named after a very long time of going without one. Then I went to the front entrance, and I unlocked the door. I have unlocked that door hundreds of times as a duty, as an obligation, as the first item on a list that belonged to everyone but me. That morning I unlocked it because it was mine to unlock. Because my grandmother had seen what I was carrying before I fully understood it myself, and she had made certain I would not carry it invisibly forever. Because the woman who taught me to say I'm running it had, in the end, made absolutely sure that I was. "Don't open it unless they try to take thee in," she said. "Then it's yours." They tried. It's mine.